The year is 1976. The Japanese company JVC, the creators of the television shaped like a space helmet, is working on a new form of media. They've been working on this new form of media since 1971, and it's about time they release it. A black cuboid with 2 windows, some tape and a door is being shown at the Okura Hotel in Japan on September the 9th. It's now October, and this new media type is being sold elsewhere in Japan. It's 1977, and this cuboid has reached the United States. By 1979, it has reached the United Kingdom. From the late 1970s to around 1988, this cuboid with 2 windows had a battle with another black cuboid, but this one only has 1 window. This format that JVC created would live on through the 1990s and the 2000s, and it wouldn't be discontinued until 2016. This new format that JVC invented was called the VHS. The 1970s was an interesting and exciting time in terms of technology. The first ever video game system, the Magnavox Odyssey, reached store shelves in 1972.
Odyssey, a new dimension for your television, now at your Magnavox dealer. He's listed in the yellow pages.
Companies like Microsoft and Apple were founded in the 70s. The Atari 2600 launched in 1976.
Attention shoppers, the new Atari cartridge game is in.
Sony introduced the Walkman in 79.
The incredible sounding Super Walkman.
And of course you had the Betamax and the VHS. Prior to the 1970s, there were many companies experimented with magnetic tape formats. Magnetic tape has been a thing since 1928, but it was from the 1950s onwards where it became more common. The first commercially successful magnetic tape format was the 2-inch quadruplex videotape invented by Ampex Corporation in 1956. This format revolutionized television operations and television production, since the only other option was to use film for kinescopes, which were more expensive to utilize and it took longer to make.
A typical reel of this 2-inch tape was 4,800 feet long. It usually holds approximately an hour of recorded material at 15 inches per second. The amount of inches per second becomes more significant as we go on to VHS and Betamax. An hour doesn't seem like a lot, but television productions would have had more than one reel. CBS were the first television network to use this format on November 30th, 1956. NBC started using it in 1957. RCA built a quad-compatible videotape recorder in 1957. The first model was the TRT-1A. This model was only able to record and play in black and white, but later models introduced colour. Ampex updated their models throughout the late 50s and 60s, with the second generation model arriving in 1964. This is the Ampex 1000B model, made between 1959 and 1961. Some other companies produced their own models, including 2 companies from Russia and even Sony in 1958. The 2-inch quadruplex videotape format is no longer in use, but it did come a long way. Ampex and RCA continued to make models of this format until 1975.
Sony produced their own magnetic tape format in 1969 called the U-matic. It would go on sale in 1971. Sony, Matsushita Electric Industrial Co., now known as Panasonic, Victor Company of Japan, or JVC for short, and 5 other non-Japanese companies collaborated on the U-matic. Like the quadruplex, recording only reached an hour. This format developed some issues, however. A recurring problem with the format was damage to the videotape because of friction, and it had issues with the colour as well as unwanted noises. Besides all that, it was relatively innovative for the 60s and 70s. Philips started working on another format, but this time something new. In 1972, they launched the VCR, or video cassette recording. This is not to be confused with the videocassette recorder we're used to. Unlike the others, this was more for home and educational use. They were quite expensive to buy and operate though. The first model, the N1500, was around £600, which is roughly £7,300 today. Like the others, recording time was only an hour, making it unreliable for home and educational use. This never came to the US and was only available in the UK, a bit of Europe, Australia and South Africa.
They had plans to release it in America, but because America used and still does use NTSC, it was seen to be less reliable than PAL. Since NTSC is older, so it never came to the US. The last model was released in 1979. Now, we get to the Betamax, which was released in 1975 by Sony.
Now, that's just, that is, wow, what is that? This is the Sony Betamax. Console TV, right?
These tapes were able to hold more than an hour. Eventually, when Betamax was introduced, the most you could record was an hour, which was fine for short TV shows, but not for recording films. You would need to buy more than one cassette if you were going to record long films and games or sports. There were some upsides to Betamax though, compared to his main rival, the VHS, which launched in 1976. On a VHS, you'll often find the title of the film, the catalogue number, the rating given by whichever rating system the country uses, a copyright warning, the company's logo that made the tape, 2 windows, one on each side, and a door at the top. But what made the VHS win over Betamax?
The battle between VHS and Betamax is a long and complicated one, but it is really interesting. There were other formats like the LaserDisc trying to become popular throughout the 1980s, but they didn't. Let's cover the pros and cons.
The prices for both VHS and Betamax were incomprehensibly high. The most advanced model you could buy for a Betamax machine in the late 70s in the US, according to this chart, hovered around the $1,200 to $1,300 mark. The most advanced VHS model you could get was almost at $1,300, but you were able to get a $1,000 VHS model, but this version didn't have every feature. For 1979, that's ludicrously high. You can buy much cheaper VCRs for both formats nowadays if you ever want one.
Mine was around £80 or $102, but you can buy even cheaper ones on Amazon and eBay. I once saw a Sony VHS VCR starting at 99p on eBay.
Betamax VCRs are a little bit more expensive on eBay, but they're not too expensive. You can still buy blank and release VHS and Betamax tapes on eBay and Amazon, with most of them at a cheap price. Nowadays, price isn't the problem.
What was a problem with the VHS though, which is arguably the biggest issue, was the fact that VHS had a lower image quality than the Betamax did. To prove this, here is a 1985 promo sales tape depicting the differences in quality from Beta and VHS. As you can see, Betamax is in higher quality. Also, the VHS VCRs weren't built to the highest of standards compared to Betamax.
Even ejecting was different. This video shows the differences in ejecting. Watch how different they are. Of course, later VHS models had a different ejecting method. It comes out from the front of the VCR rather than the top. Have you seen how injecting and ejecting works on Beta and VHS? No? Well, let me show you. This is the inside of a VCR model. The most important parts to look at are the rollers, the head drum, and the control/audio head. As a tape is inserted, the control head grabs the tape as the rollers go on opposite sides of the drum. These read the magnetic information on the tape. The tape reels inside the VHS cassette therefore spin, which is pretty cool to see from this angle. This is a picture that shows every component that links to the tape. This process is called helical scan.
When you want to eject the tape, the process reverses itself with the rollers going back into their position as the tape goes back inside the cassette. Sometimes though, the tape can snap if your VCR has an issue. This happened to me once.
Does the VHS have any good aspects? Yes, it's lighter, easier to make, and it holds more tape than Beta. This picture shows the size difference of a Beta tape and a VHS tape. As you can see, the Betamax tape is smaller and therefore has lower capacity. That was one of the reasons why VHS succeeded from the start, its bigger capacity.
Another thing was the fact that at the beginning, Sony wouldn't allow other companies to produce their own Beta models. JVC allowed other companies to do that, so there was more of a range of VHS machines on the market. companies like Aiwa, Akai, AWA, Bush, Daewoo, Ferguson, Goodman's, Hitachi, LG, Matsui, Mitsubishi, Orion, Samsung, Sanyo, Sharp, Symphonic, Thomson and Toshiba all made VHS VCRs.
My VCR is made by Samsung. Companies like Toshiba and Sanyo created Betamax machines once Sony allowed other companies to do so. Companies like NEC made both models to please both types of consumers. Here's an advertisement they made expressing this from 1984.
Beta produces the best possible picture.
Big deal.
What may be no big deal to some people may be a big deal to you. That's why NEC makes both VHS and Beta to give you the best choice. Which VCR is right for you? NEC.
These are your NEC big dealers.
And that's only the basics of the battle. We still have to talk about the different versions of Beta and VHS, the accessories for both formats, and really how the VHS won. There were three main versions of the Betamax, Beta 1, 2 and 3.
When Beta launched, the tape moved at 1.57 inches per second. Remember that. When VHS launched, the tape moved at 1.31 inches per second. Keep in mind that at this stage, Beta could only record at 1 hour and VHS could record for 2 hours. When Beta 2 launched, the tape moved at 0.79 inches per second. They did this to get recording time to hit 2 hours. Because of this, technically speaking, the quality ended up looking worse on Beta. When Beta 3 came out, VHS was already crowned king. VHS's capability of recording for 2 hours at launch pushed it ahead of Beta, but that wasn't it for Betamax. Another reason why VHS won is because they copied Sony.
In 1983, Sony launched
Beta Hi-Fi.
Hi-Fi means high fidelity. This made the sound quality a lot better as if it was a CD. VHS will never copy that, they said. Well, they did in 1984. Then, in 1985, Sony launched Super Betamax. This pumped up the image quality. VHS will never copy that, they boasted. Well, guess what? They did, creating the VHS HQ. They also launched Super VHS in 1987. This could record for 9 hours on SLP mode and, according to some sources, 15 hours on certain PAL machines. Not only that, but SVHS increased the image quality on the VHS by 60%. In 1988, Sony launched Extended Definition Beta, or ED Beta, but at that point, VHS won the war. You know how we've previously mentioned how beta cassettes were a huge disadvantage for Sony? Well, they tried to take advantage of its smaller size with camcorders.
In 1983, they launched Beta Movie. This essentially allowed you to record on the go. You would just pop a blank tape in there, hit record, and there you go. Seems simple enough. Well, two problems here. One, it couldn't play back, and two, Sony had to sacrifice a disastrous amount of time and money for it to work. Because it couldn't play back, the only way you could view what you recorded is to go back home and pop the thing into your VCR. This time, JVC didn't copy Sony, Sony copied them.
In 1982, JVC launched VHS-C. This was a tiny cassette that could only hold 30 to 60 minutes of tape. In order to view it, you would simply put the VHS-C into an adapter and then put the adapter into your VCR. What made this better than Beta Movie was that the cameras were smaller and playback was possible. SVHS-C was later launched, with the quality being a lot better than the regular VHS-C cassettes. You can still buy VHS-C to VHS adapters on eBay.
Sony launched the Video 8 in 1985. This was slightly better than Beta Movie. The maximum 2-hour capacity worked well for the people who bought one, but it was quite expensive. Sony just couldn't get it. They kept trying and trying, but they always screwed up in one way or another. Is it really all Sony's fault? No. JVC was mostly copying what Sony was doing to please their customers. 1988 is often regarded the end of Beta. Right at the start, Sony was doomed because of their small cassettes.
When the term home video came around, movie and TV production companies found it easier to release their products onto VHS. It was cheaper and therefore more flexible for them. Even the name Beta is misleading. The term almost means second, as in the second best, the alternative option, the fallback. From 1988 onwards, Sony started producing their own VHS machines. What's interesting to note though is that both VHS and Beta were discontinued in the same year, 2016. Sony did eventually win a war in 2006 between Blu-ray and HD DVD, and their 1980 invention, the compact disc or CD, was insanely successful. So at least we can say Sony did win in some ways, but not with the Betamax.
Of course, nothing lasts forever, and the VHS, like many other formats of the 70s and 80s, eventually did die out. But before we get on to why, let me show some other accessories and types for and of VHS. Shortly after its debut, tape rewinders were developed for it. This rewound tapes at a faster pace without causing deterioration. How have I not talked about deterioration yet? I'll show you some footage I got in a moment.
Anyway, these tape rewinders were very clever and very useful despite being simple. By 2013, companies like Radio Shack still made them. You can still buy a tape rewinder off of eBay, although for quite a high price. The cheapest one I could find was this one on Amazon for $13.50. Other things JVC introduced for the VHS format were DVHS and WVHS. The D in DVHS originally stood for data, but it now stands for digital. It was introduced in 1998. WVHS first came about in 1994 in Japan. In Japan, W is often used as a shorthand for the English word double, meaning that the entire thing stands for Double Video Home System.
Anyways, about deterioration, deterioration, also known as junk, is where the tape inside a cassette is ruined or remotely destroyed. Sometimes you'll see these white lines on a tape when playing it. This tells you that the tape is somewhat deteriorated. A deteriorated tape I have is a Fireman Sound one from 1988. This indicates that the tape is crinkled and is on its last legs. This also means that you have to be delicate with your tapes. They deteriorate gradually on their own, but if you touch the tape, it ruins the quality when watching it. This explains why on the top of a VHS cassette on the door, it says, "Do not touch the tape inside." Back to DVHS and WVHS. The DVHS and WVHS were quite successful, to say the least, considering that a new format hit the market. DVHS was JVC's last attempt to keep VHS alive because of a certain disc that came out in the 90s. WVHS tapes are quite difficult to find nowadays, as another format took over. What was this format, you ask? Well, it was
DVD, or the Digital Versatile Disc, launched in 1996 in Japan. It hit Asia and the United States in 1997. It arrived in Europe and Australia in 1998. It was developed by Panasonic, Samsung, Toshiba, Philips, and a name we've heard a million times already, Sony. What you just saw was an advert from 1997 about the DVD from Toshiba. This is a demonstration ad by Sony called This Is DVD. As you can see, the quality on the DVD is a lot better than the VHS.
You can tell that the creators of the DVD really wanted to use it, and we did. But how does a DVD actually work? Well, each disc has a pattern on it. A laser is used, which reads digital information to produce sounds and visual. By 2003, DVD had replaced VHS in sales, and the last JVC VHS model was created in 2008. The noughties saw an increase in popularity in DVD, but VHS was still quite high in terms of popularity, but not in terms of use. 2016 was the last year a VHS component was made. Funai, a company from Japan, was the last company to make a VHS component, since JVC dropped it in 2008. In fact, VHS was discontinued in America entirely in 2008, as they saw DVD to be a lot better.
Most companies from the late 90s to the early 2000s still produce their films and TV shows onto VHS. The youngest VHS I have is a Simpsons tape from 2003. The oldest tape I have is Now One, released in 1983. Yes, now's what I call music did release some albums onto VHS.
Some companies, especially children entertainment companies like Hit, release their productions on both DVD and video. Here's an example. That was from 2004, and by that point, we all knew that DVD was the winner, but why did it win? Simply because it used digital technology and not analog. DVDs were purely easier to use, and rewinding and fast forwarding was more flexible.
What's interesting though is that many companies made VHS DVD combo machines, like this one from Panasonic. Many companies also released CRT TVs. CRT stands for cathode ray tube, with a VHS VCR attached. These were called TV VCR combos or televideos. Some later releases had both a VHS and a DVD port. This is my TV VCR combo from Daewoo. It cost me £38. It fully works and it looks quite nice.
Speaking of Panasonic, did you know that they made a VHS/Blu-ray combo? No? Well, neither did I at one point. You look at this thinking, why is this a thing? Just to clarify, Blu-ray discs came out in June 2006, so this combo was made sometime around then. I couldn't find an exact date, but I'm guessing somewhere around there. VHS was pretty much dead by that point, so why is it a thing? I have no clue. It's pretty pricey, which makes sense because it was quite rare to come across. Panasonic is the only company that I know of that made a VHS/Blu-ray combo. Interestingly, the VHS output on that machine is 1080p, so it's not SVHS or anything like that.
Anyway, the VHS was being developed for 40 years, from 1976 to 2016. It just goes to show how universal it was. No, not that kind of universal. There are several reasons why so many people remember and preserve VHS. One of the most obvious reasons is because, for many of us, it was a major part of our childhood. We would have owned many children's and educational tapes. Another reason is because many VHS tapes are quite rare and expensive. People don't realise how valuable old pieces of technology are.
Some people that used VHS might have a sense of nostalgia from them and would want to keep and preserve them. Recording on VHS was really cool, and many of our families would have recorded life's precious moments onto video. It's a good thing to preserve things when our older ancestors pass away.
A fifth reason is because not everything released on VHS will be released on other formats like DVD. This goes back to the idea of rarity. Not every movie is available at your fingertips, but you can watch a VHS anytime you want.
VHS shows that old technology can indeed return once more. We can go even wider and talk about the LaserDisc in detail, but that's the story for another day.
Thank you very much for watching this documentary. We really hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you all later.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.